The Scottish Highlands, with their jagged peaks and deep brooding lochs, are a land steeped in history and legend. On a dark and stormy evening, when the mist rolls in thick from the sea and the wind howls like a beast in pain, the Highlands take on an otherworldly air. It was on such a night that young McGregor found herself caught in the grips of a tale older than the mountains themselves. Had been visiting her grandmother's croft in Glencoe, a village known for its tragic history and haunting beauty. The sky had been clear when she set out for a walk, but as often happens in the Highlands, the weather turned without warning. Now, as the clouds gathered overhead and the first drops of rain splattered on the ground, hurried to find shelter. She knew the area well, but the deepening gloom and the mist that had begun to snake through the glen made every hill and tree look unfamiliar. The path before her seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning in ways that made her question her sense of direction. She pulled her coat tighter around her as the wind picked up, driving the rain into her face like icy needles. Ahead, she saw it, a solitary figure standing by the edge of the path. At first, she thought it might be a fellow traveler, caught in the storm like herself, but as she drew closer, something about the figure made her hesitate. It was a man, tall and gaunt, dressed in tattered clothes that looked centuries old. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes were shadowed hollows. Eileen's heart began to pound in her chest. She had heard stories of the Highland ghosts, the spirits of those who had died tragically, their souls trapped between this world and the next. But those were just tales, weren't they? The man raised a hand, beckoning her forward. Despite her fear, Eileen felt a strange compulsion to obey. She approached cautiously, every nerve in her body, screaming at her to turn and run, yet her feet moved of their own accord. When she was only a few paces away, the man spoke, his voice a low, rasping whisper that seemed to echo off the mountains around them. "Lass, do you ken the tale of the McDonalds of Glencoe?" Eileen nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Everyone in these parts knew the story, the massacre of Glencoe, when the clan Campbell, under orders from the Crown, had slaughtered the McDonalds into their beds, violating the sacred Highland code of hospitality. The blood of the fallen had stained the snow, and it was said that the ghosts of the betrayed still haunted the glen. The man's eyes bored into hers. Was one of them, a McDonald, slain in the night by those we had welcomed into our home? My soul, can I rest until justice is done, until the truth is known? Eileen's breath caught in her throat. But that was over 300 years ago, she whispered. Aye, the ghost replied, his voice tinged with bitterness. 300 years, and still we wander these hills. Our spirits tied to this place by the weight of our betrayal. The wind howled around them, and Eileen felt a chill that went bone deep. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The ghost's gaze softened, and for a moment Eileen saw the man he had once been. A Highland warrior, proud and fierce, cut down before his time. Tell our story, lass. Let the world ken what was done to us, so that we might find peace at last. Eileen nodded slowly. I will, she promised, her voice gaining strength. I'll tell everyone. What happened here? The ghost smiled, a sad, wistful smile that tugged at Eileen's heart. Thank ye, lass. Ye have the spirit of a Highlander, and for that I'm grateful. As suddenly as he had appeared, the ghost began to fade, dissolving into the mist that swirled around them. Eileen stood frozen, watching as the last traces of his form were swallowed by the fog. When the figure was gone, the wind died down, and the rain ceased its relentless assault. Eileen looked around, realizing with a start that the path was once again clear and familiar. She turned and hurried back to her grandmother's croft, the ghost's words echoing in her mind. That night, as she sat by the fire, warming her chilled bones, Eileen told her grandmother what had happened. The old woman listened in silence, her eyes narrowing in thought. You've had an encounter with the Phantom of Glencoe, her grandmother said quietly when Eileen had finished. Many have seen him, but few have spoken with him. It's said that those who do are marked by the spirits, chosen to carry their tale forward. Eileen shivered, though the fire was warm. Do you believe it, Gran? Her grandmother smiled faintly. Aye, I do. The Highlands are full of secrets. Eileen, some we'll never understand, but that doesn't mean they aren't real. In the days that followed, Eileen found herself returning to the glen, her mind full of the ghost's plea. She began to write, pouring the tragic history of the McDonalds onto the page, determined to honor the promise she had made. And though she never saw the ghost again, she could feel his presence in the mist, in the wind that whispered through the heather, and in the shadows that danced on the hills. The Highlands had chosen her as their storyteller, and she would not fail them. For in the land of the Highland ghosts, stories were the only thing that truly lasted, carrying the voices of the past into the hearts of those who would listen, ensuring that the dead were never forgotten.